Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earliest crimes. But before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. I am creating an Easter card today and I will be using this old stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. It's called My Kind of Peeps. I will be stamping it in Versaclear Nocturne Black ink onto some Bristol vellum paper. I wanted to try that with the colored pencils. It's not great for blending, but because I'm going to put stickles over the top of the bunnies to make it look like that sugar that's on the peeps, it's not a big deal that the blending and the shadows and the highlights weren't super obvious. I'm going to stamp the sentiment in the center and stack some peeps around it. I forgot to trim the paper down to the size I wanted, so a lot of the things I wanted to add to this card got nixed because, well, I mathed bad. But the card turned out cute. I don't hate it. So we're going to let it be, and we're going to jump on into the crime. Our journey today takes us to the state of West Virginia. West Virginia was recognized by the U.S. government as the 35th state when it joined the Union on June 20th, 1863 during the Civil War. The state was created when the western counties that were not in favor of slavery voted to separate from the state of Virginia. It was one of two states that joined the Union during the Civil War. I think the other one was Nevada. West Virginia is the only state completely within the Appalachian Mountain Range, aptly giving the nickname the Mountain State. West Virginia is home of billboard advertising and rural mail delivery. And it is home to the oldest continuously operated dime store. Burdine's Five and Dime has been in operation since 1908. West Virginia is the third most forested state and is home of the wrongly named New River. The New River is actually older than the mountains. West Virginia is the home of the Golden Delicious Apple and the first land battle of the Civil War. And West Virginia is home to many ghost stories and ghost haunts and ghosts, including the ghost of Mamie Thurman. You know me, I'm more interested in how the ghost became a ghost than where it's haunting. So let's talk about how Mamie became a ghost. Mamie L. Morrison, 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 was born on September 12, 1900 in Adair, Kentucky to George and Ollie Morrison. Now we have a little bit of that history record-keeping hiccup because Mamie's wiki page said her mother died when she was 4 months old. But according to other family records, Ollie died in 1901 after her son was born. And that kind of tracks because on George's death certificate, it lists a son as the next of kin. So probably Mamie was the first of the two children born to George and Ollie died when her second son was an infant. Now, I couldn't find the cause of Ollie's death, but given that it was just 4 months theoretically after the birth of her son and that it was 1901, my guess would be complications during childbirth, but again, I don't know. Her death certificate, I didn't see an actual picture of the death certificate, so I don't know. But back to Mamie. She was raised with her brother by their father. I also couldn't really find anything about what he did for a living or how their family life was. I will say that when I found George's death certificate, there was a note from his son. I guess there was a rumor that he had been killed in a shootout with the police, but his son said that was not accurate. He was in fact a drunk. And in a drunken stupor, he fell and hit his head somewhere in the hills near their home and was out in the elements for a few days before he was found and brought home. Exposure to the elements caused him to develop pneumonia, which was listed as his cause of death. So those little details don't really indicate a super happy home life, like a stable home life, right? Sorry, I had to rearrange myself in my chair and it's a little squeaky. So Mamie grows up and she meets Alvin Emmett Thurman, who went by the nickname of Jack. I don't know why. Alvin, aka Jack, was born on May 6, 1884 in Marion, Kentucky to William and Anna Thurman. He was fifth of their 12 children. They had 8 boys and 4 girls. Jack and Mamie met and were eventually married on March 27th of 1930. So Mamie would have been like 30 years old when she got married, which was really old for then. I mean, not that it's old, but for then it was old. So that was unusual. After the two were married, they moved to Kentucky, or moved from Kentucky to Logan County, West Virginia. Jack got a job as a patrolman with the local police department. Jack and Mamie rented a 2-room apartment over a garage located in the backyard of Harry and Louise Robertson's home. So Harry Robertson worked for the National Bank of Logan and also served as treasurer of the Logan Public Library, and Louise was a typical of the time housewife. Now, Mamie was described as, quote, pretty and little. So she was shorter than average and pretty, and she had dark hair. And Jack seems to be kind of an average, good-looking, clean-cut gentleman. I have pictures. They're at the end. Jack was assigned to night patrol. So in the evenings, the two would have their evening meal. Jack would put on his uniform, kiss his pretty wife, and head out to work under the impression that his wife did not venture out after dark. Because why would she? She was supposed to be home cleaning up after dinner and preparing for the next day. Well, 31-year-old Mamie was known as a good wife, a saintly woman, and a faithful churchgoer at the Nibert Memorial Church. But like people and coins do, Mamie had a flip side. She was also known to frequent local clubs and speakeasies. She was popular there and was noted for her friendly disposition. On Wednesday, June 22nd, 1932, a 32-year-old deaf-mute man named Garland Davis was picking berries near the top of Trace Mountain. I believe that was about 7 miles from the center of Logan County. Okay, so he was out working and he stumbles across like something out of nightmares, right? He finds the body of a young woman who had been shot, stabbed, and left discarded in a ditch. Obviously, he goes for help, right? He goes for help, and when the help arrives, the woman is identified as Mamie. Now, the sources I read didn't indicate that it was her husband who identified her, so I am guessing it was somebody else, maybe another policeman on the force who knew her. So while the scene is being investigated, there is nothing about this that suggests robbery is the motive. Okay, right away, that is eliminated. Mamie's handbook, her pocketbook, was found near her body, and inside of it were $8 in cash, some loose coins, and cigarettes still wrapped in paper. She was still wearing her wristwatch, a gold diamond ring, and her engagement ring. Another odd thing that was noted was that near her was a piece of paper with a license plate number written on it. So police began to question the Thurmans' neighbors and friends, and as they are questioning people of the county, two people's names went to this and ended up on the suspect list. And that was Harry Robertson, the landlord, and his handyman who boarded in the attic of his home, 29-year-old Clarence Stevenson. So now, why would a stuffed shirt banker who rented a garage apartment to the Thurmans be a suspect? And what would his live-in handyman and friend have to do with Mamie's murder? Well, let me tell you, that's why I'm here. Mamie was well known in town at church and the Women's League. But as I also mentioned, she was a regular at the speakeasies and clubs in town. And she was reportedly, air quotes you can't see, friends with more than a dozen powerful men in the county, including Harry Robertson. Yeah. 2 days after Mamie was found, her funeral was held. It was an interesting funeral. Reverend Gamble led the services, and according to those present, the only scriptures read were the words, quote, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone," end quote. So apparently, Mamie's extracurricular activities weren't super secret. Mamie's obituary was the only other thing read before the weeping mourners filed out of the church. 550 women and 30 men attended her funeral service. And after they left, Jack was there, alone, on the front pew, staring at his wife's closed casket. Now, you and I know that the significant other is always the top of the suspect list in these types of cases. And I would have guessed that Jack would have been right up there on top. A policeman with a wife who had less than legal extracurriculars, high on the list, especially because apparently the whole town knew except maybe him. But nothing that I read indicated that Jack was ever a suspect. So whoever she was friends with must have kept that secret good. Other people that would have been close to the top of the list would be Louise Robertson, now that it's out that her husband has been having an affair with Mamie. She was aware, or at least suspicious, of this affair. She had cut off all social interactions that she had with Mamie through the church and the Women's League. And even the two had been friends, like social friends. They went golfing together. But she was like, yeah, no more. She was done with the social interactions with Mamie. And I suppose that any of the wives of the other men that Mamie was friends with would also have been on that list, or should have been on that list. While Mamie's funeral was being held, the Robertson house was being searched by state police. And there were some probable, possible evidence found. In the basement, there was a depression on the wall that was suspiciously the shape of a bullet. Bloodstains were found. There was blood in the carpet. There were blood on some rags. There was blood on a razor. There was blood on the seat and the window of the Ford sedan owned by Harry Robertson. With the evidence in the Robertson home piling up, theories were bound to be abundant. It could have been either of the Robertsons that had killed Mamie. If she was killed in their basement and transported in the car, as this blood evidence is indicating, it probably was not Louise. She was not thought to be strong enough to carry a dead body, even a small one like Mamie. So Harry admitted to having a 2-year affair with Mamie. Their meetings were arranged through Clarence, who planned fake hunting trips with Harry, and then would drop Harry off at this pre-arranged rendezvous point to meet Mamie. Could Clarence have been the killer? Could he have been instructed by either of the Robertsons to kill her? So there's a lot, just in this one house, there's a lot of possibilities going on here. So the evidence collected in the Robertson house led to the arrest of Harry and Clarence. It should be noted here that Clarence was a black man, and this is the 1930s. And while nothing I read specifically said that's why he ended up where he was, it could not have not been a factor. Unfortunately, it just could not have been. So during the investigation, and then again into the trial, Harry was willing to throw anyone under the bus if it meant he was not in the hot seat. He, in his interviews to the police and again on the stand, testified that he and Mamie had been having an affair. He also said that Mamie gave him a list of 16 men who were members of the Key Club. Here's my air quotes. He did not give a clear picture of what this club was, but the speculation after this conversation with him was that it included, illegal booze, dancing, and sex. What was also apparent, according to the sources I read, was that the 16 men named by Mamie were socially and or politically connected and very likely to have been involved with or connected to the investigation and trial into Mamie Thurman's murder. This juicy piece of information was just one of the reasons the courtroom was packed with spectators every day, and in the hot, unconditioned courtroom in West Virginia in July. The assistant prosecutor stated that Mamie was, quote, the most popular woman, end quote, in the county, and that her death was the most brutal murder to occur there as well. He also stated to the press that he wouldn't drag any man's name through the mud, quote, just to get even at them, end quote. So I don't know if he's making a dig at Harry or if he's just on that list as well. I mean, if I was on the list, I wouldn't be throwing adultery stones around either. He did say that he was not interested in prosecuting anyone for adultery, a crime that was still prosecutable in the 1930s, because it was a small-time thing, right? Which must have been a convenient relief for Harry. So the trial against Clarence goes forward, and the cast of characters is interesting. There were 3 prosecutors assigned to the case, with the defense being led by a former judge and a man who would go on to become a judge. A 3rd judge offered his services free to the prosecution. His name was Judge Dameron, and his opinion was that Mamie's murder was a conspiracy. On July 29th, 1932, 1,000 people showed up for a preliminary hearing of Clarence, which was under the authority of Magistrate Hatfield. Now, this magistrate was the son of Cap Hatfield, the famous father in the Hatfield-McCoy feud. Yeah, those Hatfields. So there is a preliminary hearing and then a trial, and I think they happened at the same, like one right after the other, because Harry is called to the stand, and he publicly admits to this 2-year affair. So now he's told his wife, he's told the police, and now he's telling everybody, all 1,000 people in this courtroom, that he had a 2-year affair with Mamie. And then he also testified about his knowledge of the Key Club, which was also known as the Amen Club. He described the inside of the Holland building, and he testified that many local, well-known businessmen brought their, quote, lady friends there to socialize. He also testified that the members, the men and the women, had pass keys for the club, so they could get into the Holland building without being let in. He claimed that the 16 men on the list were all married except for one. All but 3 of the 16 lived in the county, and at the time of the trial, one of the 16 was no longer alive. These men. Okay, this is just the men. So Garland Davis, through an interpreter, also testified about his involvement or his discovering of Mamie's body. He stated that after finding the body, he left the berry bushes and went to the road and found a man he knew as Neely, and together they went down the road to 21 Mine Road and told the men there about the dead woman. Garland then said that he and Neely went back to the location of the body in Neely's truck, and they were joined by 2 men, and he only knew them by their last names, Hernshaw and Holland, the same Holland family that owned the building where the Key Club events were reportedly held. I don't know, I'm agreeing with that judge. There's a little bit of conspiracy going on here. So also included in evidence was a report. It was a coroner's report of the wounds Mamie suffered at the time of her death. So she was shot twice in the head with a .38 caliber revolver. She had her throat sliced and had been stabbed many times. Clarence and his version of the events of the night Mamie killed were also entered into evidence. What I'm not sure of is whether he testified or whether his police interview was read into the court trial. But what he said was that he was told by Harry to go look for Mamie. His instructions were to go to the bank, which was across the street from the Holland Club, and sit on the bank steps and watch for her to enter or leave the Holland building. Yeah, you know, the Key Club Holland building. He never admitted to seeing Mamie that night. He did admit that he was Harry's alibi on the nights that he and Mamie had their rendezvous. So Clarence's trial concluded and the jury was sent to deliberate. I did not see anything that the defense countered with except for Clarence's his version of events. The sources I found did not indicate any of that. I also don't know how long the jury deliberated. When they returned, they handed down their sentence they handed back their verdict, and it was a verdict of guilt. Clarence had been found guilty. And here's another weird thing. I don't know what his sentence was. Like in the sources I found about this, including on Mamie's wiki page, it does not say what his sentence was or whether or not that sentence was carried out. Just that he was found guilty. Mamie Thurman's death certificate, words are hard, filed at the courthouse states she was buried in Logan Memorial Park in McConnell, West Virginia. However, other records indicate her body was transported back to Kentucky. And where she is today actually remains a mystery. So a little bit of geography here. So Mamie's body was buried about 7 miles from the center of the county. The courthouse at the time of Mamie's murder was a 2-minute walk from her home and from the Robertson home. Her home was a 4-minute walk to the police station and a 4-minute farther walk to the Holland building. So in less than 10 minutes, she could have been at the Holland building and the bank and all those buildings. They're all on the same street and all within an easy walk of each other. So just a little weird geography. So local lore claims that Mamie's ghost haunts the area on Mountain Road called 22 Mine Road, where her body was dumped. She has been seen at the top of the mountain walking along the roadway, but that isn't all. Legends in the area state that if you park at the bottom of 22 Mine Road and put your car in neutral, it will roll uphill, and that Mamie's ghostly hands are pushing your vehicle. Okay, I'm not going to go check it out. I live close enough, but I'm not going to. I do have pictures though. So first we're going to look at the finished card. It's a little hard to see all of the stickles in the finished card, but here's a picture of Mamie. And next is a picture of her husband, Jack. And last of all is a picture of Harry. I did not find a picture of Clarence. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed our story. I have a couple of other videos here I think you would like as well. I have also added that subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me if you like the crime or the ghost part best. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and have a really great day.